Okay, lovely. So welcome back. Hope you've had a nice little break and got everything organised. Drink of water, all those things. And I'm just going to now rule up my page and put my grid lines on. So you may have already done that, but if not, then now's the time to do that. So your halfway mark on this colour fix paper. So this is a colour fix gritty paper. It feels a little bit like fine sandpaper. So it's 23 by 30. So halfway is 11.5. So if I rule my line there and then draw that down the center, that gives me my center line. Just going to do it very lightly with my white charcoal pencil. If you're on a lighter paper, you might want to use a piece of charcoal, which will work just as well. It's easier to get the charcoal off your paper later than it is to get your pastel off. So just try and use charcoal pencils if you can. So halfway down is 15, and then half of that is 7.5. So 7.5 and 22.5. So marking this into 8 segments, 15, 7.5, 22.5. And then ruling in your lines just lightly so you can take them off again later. And what I'm going to do is mark those lines around the outside edge of my page as well. So that little white margin will become the area where I can put my grid marks in, just with a bit of charcoal, just lightly, so I know where they are. If I lose them during the process of doing my painting, then at least they're there, so I can hover my ruler over later on and just find them again if they disappear. All right. So once you've got your grid line on there, then you want to start drawing your cat in again. So we've already done this once, haven't we? So it should be a bit easier the second time around and not take quite as long. So let's start with the top left again and mark in those sections where the lines intersect with our grid marks. Okay. And then figure out the height of different things. So remember we said the top of the ear was about the same height as the head where it intersects that middle line. So you can use your ruler to determine that. So the top of the ear is about this high and it sits at about this far in from the side of my page. Okay, so it's about there. And then the head comes across here and it angles slightly downwards. So it comes to about there, and then we can draw in the ear. So I'm just doing this fairly quickly down through there. So they're the main shapes we need to get in for that section. And the bottom of the ear on this side comes to about there. So after you've been doing this for a while, you learn to do it by eye. I'm just measuring again. No, that's not right. So here we go. See, should have measured. Looking at the base of the ear, how far in does it come to? It comes to about there, I reckon. So it's actually fatter than I thought. Okay, so remember, this is why the grid line is really important. I made it too narrow and then I looked at where it ended and thought, no, it's further over here this way. So always double checking, because I do it too. Okay, lovely rounded top on that ear at the same height as this. So slightly angled down at the top of the head. Then moving over onto the right-hand side, continuing that across there, looking at where the top of the ear comes inside that segment. So it sits at about here. How far in from this line does it sit and how high? So I'd say about there. And then we can draw our line from there. And then the bottom of the ear on the right-hand side of the ear comes to just inside halfway. So I reckon about there. So that comes down like that. So that's my other ear. So always measure. It's really important to measure. Gets everything in the right spot. Makes a huge difference. You might have a different way. Sometimes when I'm doing complicated things, I'll trace the picture and transfer it onto the paper. So if, for instance, it's a portrait, I will trace the picture. So I'll get a bit of tracing paper. I'll print the picture out to the size that I'm going to paint it, which is sometimes tricky. If you're painting it large, you might have to print out 2 parts of it. But that's what I do. So I usually I'll use Photoshop or one of those programs, and I might print out 3 pieces of paper to make it as big as I need it. Stick them all together, get your picture together, put your tracing paper over it, trace it with a normal pencil. Then when you've traced it, flip it over. Then on the back of my tracing, I'll use either charcoal or white pencil, depending on what color paper I'm putting it onto. And so then I'll trace the tracing on the back of it with my pencil or charcoal. Then I'll flip it over again, and then I'll use a normal pencil and I'll trace it again. So you're drawing it 3 times, which is really good practice. And that then puts a very faint outline onto your page. And then that will help you get everything in the right place. So it's a really great system for things that are a little bit more complicated than your basic shapes. And I don't think it's cheating, because you've still got to do your tones and your colours and all your things. All right, so the back of the cat comes across here in the top quarter there. Bottom of the ear comes to about there. Now I'm just going to do the side of the face. So the side of the face down inside this quarter. So now we've already done this. We've already rehearsed it. So we kind of know, you've got a bit of an idea of where things go. And if you got it wrong last time, then you know what to do right this time. So again, that's a good reason to rehearse. The eyes are the trickiest bit. So we need to work out how far down does the eye sit and in line with what. So let me have a look at this. You can use your ruler and say, okay, so the edge of the eye is in line with this bit on the ear. Okay, so you can draw a line straight down through there. So then you can go over to your picture and go, okay, so that's about that bit on the ear. So the edge of the eye sits at about there. Okay, so you can put a spot in for that. Then you can see where the inside of the eye meets up, and I can see on the picture it's level with the bottom of this ear. See, if I put my ruler there, I can draw a straight line down through there to there. So if I know that, then I can put my ruler over here and I can put a line there. And now I've got the width of the eye. Okay, then you can work out how low or high it is. So I can see inside this grid, if I divide this grid down that way into maybe thirds, third, I'd say it's about a third of the way down inside this grid. So that would be about there-ish. Okay, so that's going to be the top corner of my eye. I might remove that other dot so I don't confuse myself. And then the inside of the eye, which lines up with the bottom of the ear, where does that sit in relation to this grid? So it sits just above halfway. So if halfway is there, it might be about there. So I'm going to put it there. So that's the inside of my eye, okay? So now I know that's the top of the eye. That's the inside of the eye. So I can do a little arc like that. And then I can look at the eye this way and see how low it is in relation to my grid line. So where does it sit? And I reckon that's probably just under halfway. So if halfway is here, then I'm going to say it's about there-ish. Okay, so that will be the bottom of the eye. So then you can kind of join the dots and get the eye in the right spot. And even though it looks big in the picture, it's not really that big compared to everything else. So finding those points will help you get things in the right place. Okay, so just make sure you use those little tips to help you draw things where they need to be. Okay, so I'm going to stay in this quarter for a second and just get everything else in there. So we've got the side of the nose comes down here. Then we've got this white section here of the cheek, which comes up through there and across. So I've got this interesting little triangular shape of white fur on the top of the nose. Okay, so that's the side of the nose. The nose, I've gone too far over. So the bottom of the nose here comes to about there. And then that goes over to there, like that. And that is the side of the nose coming down through there. So just mucking around with your drawing, making sure you get everything in the right spot. Rub out the lines that are wrong so that you don't keep using them, because it's really easy to keep, you make a mark and then you keep doing the same thing over and over, because we're human and that's how we roll. Okay, so that's the shape of the triangle of the white coming up through there. So that's pretty much what we need to have in that section. Then I'll move over to the other side to get this other eye in the right spot. So then we can come back and do the same thing. You can figure out how high is that eye in relation to the other one. Remember we did that before. So a halfway mark in this eye is about the top of this eye. So it'll sit around that high. How low does it go? So I would say 1, 2, about a third of the way up in this quarter. So about to there, let's say. So that's the top, that's the bottom. Let's work out the width. The width of the eye, so the outside edge of the eye, what can we line that up with? Comes up through there. So if I bring my ruler over, then I can say, well, it sits about there. Okay, so I've got the top, this outside edge and the bottom. And then the inside bit sits, what's that line up with? Not much. So the middle of the head. So if that's the middle of the head, they're about there. So I'll say the inside sits at about there. No, in further. Okay, so at least then we've got all our little marks in and we can draw in the eye, get that in the right spot. Like that. Okay, beautiful. And then your nose comes down on a slight angle, and we've got the corner of the nose taking up the corner of these grid areas. Okay, and our white fur, you can draw a bit of the white fur in if you want to, just to determine where that goes. And over on this side, I had it there and I took it out. There we go. Something like that. And then we've got to get the side of the face in over here. So again, we can look at where that comes to. It kind of curves out a little bit down through there. And then it intersects just not quite at halfway. So I'd say about here. So we've got this lovely curved edge coming through like that. So that's the top half basically done. Then we can move down and continue on to through here. So let's bring the cheek down around here like this. Okay, down through there. The side of the face down through here. So we've got the little cheek, and we've got the mouth coming across there. And we've got the chest. So don't forget the chest comes down through there and intersects over here. So we've got a little curve there like that, which is the chest. I know it looks weird at the moment. It'll all make sense in the end, trust me. Okay, back over into this quarter now. So we've got to continue our cheek down through here like that. And then we've got the little mouth underneath, which is there. Then we've got that white coloured fur that comes down through there like that. And we've got the back in already. We've got that lovely dark section running through here. You can see the shadow of that running down. And then down into this section, fur comes around through there. And the chest continues down. We cover this top little corner in this grid here. And then it continues down like that. So that's basically our line drawings all done. Now you can see I've got a bit of a mess happening here on the paper. Hopefully that'll lift off or rub off with the kneadable eraser later on. And if not, you can always put a background in if you don't like it. Okay, so that's our drawing. Now, if you're ready to keep moving on, then we'll get stuck into putting in some colour and blocking in first before we do the detail. So first off, though, I just want to take off these grid lines, just the ones around the edges that aren't going to be covered over. You can leave the ones on the cat because we'll fill all them up with fur and things afterwards. Make sure you have those little markers around your margin, so if you need to find them again, you can. Okay, so that's our basic drawing, ready to rock and roll. How exciting. This is the fun bit now. See, I find all this drawing quite laborious sometimes, but it's so important to get it right from the start. Otherwise, you just can't ever correct it. So you need to make sure you get that bit right from the beginning. Okay, let's block in some dark. Have you got a little towel? So make sure you've got a little hand towel or wet ones or something like that, that I've wet on one end so I can wipe my fingers nice and clean and then dry them off on the other end. So when you're changing in between colours, if you've used a dark colour and you pick up a light, you might need to have nice clean fingers. All right, let's go. So we'll start off with our darkest dark, all right? And we're going to put that in where we're going to, on this body section. We'll do that part first and then we'll move into the head. So let's start down here in this area through here where the body is. So I'm going to just mark in some dark. Leave the edges where it's super light. Just leave those undone for now. And put this down through there so I can see under the face, on the right side of the face, where the body is. I've got this lovely dark area running through there. You can just put a smidge over the top as well. Okay. So that's all we need to do for that at this stage. Now, once you've got your dark marked on, and I used the pastel lying flat on its side and just wiped it. So you get a nice sort of coverage without any hard lines. Now I can push this in with my finger. So what I want to do is get it into the paper. I want to get it to stick to the paper. Now, if you have to, you'll have to overlap the face lines a little bit because we don't want to have a halo or a gap between the face and the body. So you will have to overlap that slightly. That's okay. We'll come back afterwards and put the face in on top of this part. Okay, so just pushing that in because we want to get that nice dark tone into your paper so that it kind of sticks, and then we can bring in the greys over the top. So pushing that in. If you've got a sandy paper like mine, you'll find it's a bit noisy sometimes. Sounds a bit scratchy. The other annoying thing I have to do, because I'm working flat on a table, I've got to tip off my dust. So every now and again, I'm going to do this and pick up my board, which is another reason to have a board. Tape your paper down onto it so it doesn't have to move around, and just bang that off onto my cloth, and I'll shake that off later. Okay, so now I've got that there. Just have my reference picture nearby so I can look at that and refer to it. I've also got it on my little screen over there so I can look at that on the screen and zoom in and things like that if I need to. Now I'm going to pick up my dark grey. So this is the next darkest one. And I'm just going to zhoosh some of that around in here. So what we're looking for is the very, very subtle change in tone. So you can see the leg or the shoulder or whatever it is of the cat through here. Okay, so that's a grey. It's still a dark grey, but it's not as dark as the darkest blue violet that we just used. All right, so I just want to zhoosh a bit of that on there. Now when you do it, just zhoosh it lightly. We don't want to put too much down. We're going to build up these layers and just put a little bit down to start with. So again, I've got the pastel on its side and I'm just holding it over and rubbing it onto the paper like that. And it's almost looking like fur already because of the way we're moving the pastel around on the paper. Okay. So once you've got a bit of that on there, I want you to come back in with your finger and just softly start to push it in. All right. What we're doing now is we're building up the layers. We've got dark underneath. I want to leave it darkest where it's really dark, which is down this stripe. There's like a stripe of dark down through there. So I haven't put my dark grey on that. I've left it sort of empty with the darkest colour. Now, if you feel like you need to go darker than what you've used, then now's the time to consider using something like a black if you want to make that really, really dark. All right, because that's going to be your darkest shadow kind of area. So just softly, very gently, not pushing too hard, just running your finger around like this to try and push some of the pastel into the paper, but not too hard. When you press hard, I'll show you what happens. It'll go darker because what will happen is it'll pick up some of the dark underneath it and go too dark, and then you'll have to add more over the top, which you can do, so don't stress if that's happening. But what I like to do is get the first layer down, push that in nice and firm, and then start to work on the next layers and not press quite so hard because they're getting a little bit lighter now. So that's my darkest grey. Beautiful. Now I've left this bit down here where it's quite light, and that little bit of light grey that's sitting down through here. And as we come down to the bottom of the chest, it's getting a little bit lighter through there as well. So that's where we pick up the next layer of grey. So this is my other grey, which is slightly lighter. And I'm just going to softly, softly wipe a little bit of that around here because that's a little bit lighter than the other grey. Okay, on the chest of the cat. And then down through here also, so just be above where that little white section of fur is, it's going to lighten that up a tad, and then just like almost a stripe next to that dark shadow stripe, not working out very well for me, down through there, something like that. Okay, so what I'm trying to look at here is how the fur is a lighter grey in this section here. It's not catching the light, but it is a lighter colour. And then we've also got the dark grey fur up around in the body there. The shadow runs down through this section here where it's got the darkest colour. And then we've got softly just little tiny hints of lighter grey running through here in another stripe next to the dark grey. So what that will do is if we put a little bit of the lighter grey on here and softly blend it in, softly, don't press too hard. Keep your finger on the paper and just rub it. Just keep rubbing it around like this so that you're not lifting it up and making new fingerprints each time. You want to have it like a continuous kind of line happening like that. And hopefully that's going to help to create this shadow area down through there. And if you've lost that or you want to darken it up again, just grab your dark again. So this is again my blue violet. And I'm just going to put a bit more of that in because I want to deepen it slightly, and then just softly push that around and make the edges a bit blurry, a bit soft between the light and the dark, because it's not a hard line, it's a soft line. It's all fur, so it's very soft. Okay, pushing that around like that. And then this fur over here on the chest, where I put a little bit of light grey before, I'm now going to softly pull that around as well. Very lightly, hardly touching the paper. I'm just pulling it softly, softly, because I still want to try and retain some of the texture that we've created with the pastels. So it looks furry. Okay. Now, remember I said I liked purple for the lights. So this light coloured fur down here in this bottom section, so through here, there's a little bit of lighter colour through there, isn't there? So I'm just going to use my purple, but it's not bright white, so I don't want to use white. It's a little bit lighter than the light grey, and it's just creating a bit of warmth through there. So I'm just going to put that in there. by the time you push it around a little bit, it won't be quite as bright or purple if it's too light for you. And if you need it to be lighter, then you can come back over and add a bit more. So I want to try and use a fair bit of this mauvey purpley colour throughout the fur to try and create those lighter sections without using the white. If you haven't got a lilac or a purple that you like, or it's not working that well for you, you could perhaps find a lighter grey again. So you could go even lighter than this light grey, or a blue. A light blue would be nice. I'm just going to zhoosh this around a little bit more. I want to create a bit more of a furry effect. So this is where we're getting to the last layers. I want to work on this part first so we don't have to come back after. So if we get this bit done now, then we can move on to the rest of the cat. So I'm just doing these soft little wispy kind of marks, but still using the side of the pastel because I don't want hard lines. I just want soft lines like that. And then I can get my finger and just softly, softly, very lightly push it around so that it's all sort of merging but not losing that texture, that feeling of fur. So just something like that. We're not going to put too much information in here because we want to put all the detail in the face. But just to indicate the shape of the cat, it's really important to get those shapes right. Otherwise, it might look a bit silly. So, you know, it might not seem important. It might just look like a big dark blob, but it's not. It's got lots of contour and shape. This is the cat's body that we need to make work really well. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. I'm going to add a bit more of my grey just through here, this light grey again. Another little layer over the top to get that furry effect. So just these little soft sort of swishy marks using the side of your pastel because it's a softer mark that way. Okay. And then, because if you look at the picture, you can see all the fur is running in that direction. So again, move your pastels and your finger in the direction that the fur is going. So you can see it's kind of growing downwards through this section. Growing downwards. So don't rub across because that will move the pastel in the wrong direction and then it'll change the look of it and you won't have that beautiful soft fur going in the direction that it's meant to be. Okay. Now, just for fun, I'm going to throw a little bit of this lilac over the top of some of this too, just to get some little highlights in. So softly, softly, just like that, in a couple of places. And then not blending much at all, but very gently just pushing your finger across to let that sit on the top of the greys and all the other colours that are underneath it, because this fur is really thick. It's thick and lush, and we want to make sure that we get it to look like that. Beautiful. Now I've lost the brightness down in here, so I'm just going to see if the purple's bright enough. Now, if you're not sure, what you can do is get your picture, and what I like to do is squint at my picture over my painting or near it and see if the tones are the same. So when you squint, everything seems to go black and white for some reason. Look through your eyelashes. Now, to me, when I look at the picture, my light bit there isn't quite light enough. It's not shining through as much as it is in the picture. So in that case, I'm going to pick up my light blue, hover that over the reference picture, squint again, and I can see, yeah, that looks about the same tone as I'm looking for in that section there. So if you do that, squint and then see if it's the same tone. So I'm going to put the bit of that blue in. It's slightly lighter than the violet, and it might just give me enough ping to create that little bit of light that I want to have happening through there. Okay, and again, putting that on in the direction that the fur grows. Don't blend it in. So this is where you get to this point on the final layers where you don't want to be blending it in. You want to let it sit on the top, because when you let the pastel sit on the top like this, just do very light little marks. It it shows through, so you can see the colors underneath it, but it also sits on top, so it creates that feeling of density and thickness. Okay. So that's quite nice. And just put a hint of a little bit of that through here as well. So just softly wiping that through. Because we've got this light color here, I just want to suggest a little bit of it up through there as well. That again, that's going to help to create some of that furry effect. So I'm using the pastel on its side, lying it down, and then very gently just doing these little wispy things and hoping that they'll sit on the surface and look furry. Okay, so just something like that. If it's too light or something like that, or you don't like it, just softly push it in, or softly, just blur the edges a little bit, make it not too hard. You don't want any hard lines if you can avoid it. If you've lost some of your dark again, you can come back in with some dark and just put that where it's really dark down through that little channel in there, indicating the shoulder of the cat as it's crouching or sitting. Okay. All right. So I think that might do for that section. Of course, you can always come back later on and change things, but it is much easier to do it now, and then we won't have to come back in. I'm going to tip off my dust, and then we'll get into the chest area. So under that chest in here, remember I said it looked to me like it was purple, so I'm going to squint again. Yep, it's about the right tone, I think. So I'm going to put some of that in here. This is the lilac-y kind of purple colour that I used before. So that's going to be the lighter fur. And then around the edges of that, I'm going to put some of this blue. Okay, because it's not dark, this part. It's white fur, but it's in shadow. So we need to make sure that it looks like it's white without using white. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of my grey over the top. So I'll put purple down first, bit of blue around the edges here. I'm not going to put that white shiny bit in on that very edge just yet. I just want to zhoosh a bit of my grey over the top of it to tie it in with the rest of the grey. And hopefully that will work. So now we can push some of this in. Some people don't like to push all their pastels in. You feel free to leave it loose if you like that look, if that's how you like to work. Everybody's different. And you'll find your own style or your own way as you go. So this is just my way. This is the way I like to do it. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just how I roll. I'm just going to bring up some of this purple through here as well. I don't know if you can see that now, but we're coming up around the face, but some of that little white area underneath is coming up through there. So again, just zhooshing that around. Make sure all your edges are soft. So where you're changing color from your light into the dark, make those edges nice and furry. Don't want hard lines. Tip off more dust. Okay, but it's still under shadow. So if you look at your picture, you can see this white area here is still under shadow and not bright white. I've got to save our white for last. So make sure you use other things, not white. Okay. I've got my lightest blue here now. So this is still not white, but I just want to put some of that around this edge bit here. So where the shine is, I'm going to put a little bit of this blue here. And what I'm doing is I'm using the end of it. It's sort of lying half flat, so I'm tilting it so that I've got a nice soft, furry edge. And I'm doing this furry kind of movement with it as I come down the side like that. Because I want to have a soft edge. I don't want hard lines coming through there. Okay. And then I want to pull it across into these other blues and greys so that it sort of merges in a little bit. Okay, so now I've started to create that glow that's going on around the edge of the fur. But again, I haven't used white yet. It's amazing how you can make something look white without using it. So always think about that. I'm just going to tidy up this bit here. So just carry on tidying up, blurring your edges, using your lights and your darks, checking your tones all the time, making sure this looks very soft and fuzzy, like we want the cat's fur to be. So softly around through there. That's it. Just different, just layering, isn't it? It's just putting some down, rubbing it in, putting a bit more on, changing the tone. If you want to use a different color, you can do that. So we've started to create the light there. I'm not going to put white on yet. I'm going to make that, save that for last. But you can see how the pale blue really makes it shine already. Quite cool. So I'm just looking at the picture. I'm going to bring it in a little bit more just here, because this is one of the lightest parts of the cat. And then just softly blur off those edges so that it merges in kind of naturally like that. Okay. I know it doesn't really make sense to be using purples and whites for your lights, but it will in the end. And it means that you can get your really bright brights in the last bit. All right, so now we've got a fair bit of the body done. I think we might now move on to the rest of it. So I just want to zhoosh a bit more of this down through here. So what I'm doing is I'm closing the gap between the darker fur and the light fur, maybe a little bit more than what's already in the picture. I just feel like I want to merge those two slightly. And to do that, I'm just pulling my light blue across like this. And as you do that, it picks up the darker color. You can see it on the pastel there. So that's when you need to clean it off. If you want to clean a nice clean blue again, you're going to have to, see it's dirty, grab a little towel, or have a paper towel is really good. Just give it a wipe on paper towel, come back over, and you've got a nice clean mark. So there's a lot of, wiping and cleaning and that sort of thing as you go with this. If I kept doing that and then putting the pastel back down and doing it again, it's picking up the darks and putting it back into the lights, and that's not where I want it to be. So we've got to clean them off in between marks often. Okay, quite like what's going on there. That'll be fine for now. Just want to zhoosh a little bit more down through here. So I'm just looking at the detail now in the fur, and I just want to soften off through here and get a bit more of a furry thing going on. Again, I'm just using my grey pastel now on its side, but vertically, and just because it's quite a long bit, that's why. If it was a shorter piece, I could probably manage it the other way around. But I just wanted to do that to get the fur looking furry. This is now dark grey, so I'm just coming over the top, same sort of movement. See how you can get that lovely furry effect just by softly marking it in like that. It's now starting to look nice and furry. Great. And zhoosh a bit of that up through here. And again, I can just tip off this dust now. It looks a bit light to me anyway. That'll be fine. Looking a bit light, might put a bit more dark over the top. So it's in my darkest, my blue violet. And again, you can do the same sort of thing. Start to create the depth in the fur. Well, that's quite good. I like what happened then. Sometimes it's just trial and error. And that's the nice thing about pastels. You can actually try things. And if it doesn't quite work, you can just sort of push it in or brush it off, go over it with another colour. They're very forgiving. That's what I like about them. Because I'm not very good at being perfect. I like to try things and see what happens. And then if it doesn't work, get rid of it. Dust. So you can see I've got a few fingerprints through there. I'm just going to softly push them off so that they disappear. And I think we might just leave that as is for now and move on to the next part. So now we've got to look at the face. So the face is mostly grey. Just going to study this for a minute. So the back of the head up the top there is, we've got a lot of light, and then across the back up there. But down through here, it's sort of these mid and dark greys, I think. So let's focus on blocking in most of the face, and then we'll work on the detail. So grab our light grey first. So that's that one there. And I'm just going to literally block in the face with some of this, and then we can build it up. So blocking this in. Again, try to keep the edges where the face sort of meets the back soft. So keep nice soft edges. You don't want to be using it like that and making a hard line. We just want really soft lines and gentle. Just go lightly with your pastel over into those grey areas. Where it's the whitest fur, try to sort of leave that uncovered with the grey, because it'll contaminate later and it'll make your whites dirty and dark. So where you've got really, really white areas, which is this, the fur on the cheeks, try to leave those empty at the moment, because we'll come back to those and put them in afterwards. So I'm literally just putting the grey pretty much everywhere else, on his nose, nose, down through there. There's a little bit in there. And then we've got some light or white through there as well, which we did on the other side already. So that's a bit of mid-grey. Okay, so we're just blocking in at the moment. We're just getting some colour on the paper, so then we'll have something to work with. So now I've got my dark grey. I'm just going to zhoosh that around where I can see the darker greys. Okay, so inside the ear, either side, and then the edge of the ear up towards the top there. Down through here, we've got these dark grey marks that are on top of the nose. Up again through the other ear, at the bottom there. We'll get our darkest dark in a minute and mark in the really dark parts. Down through the nose here. So just zhooshing some of this around pretty much everywhere where the other grey went. Because remember, we're going to build layers. So this isn't the final layer. So don't stress if it's not looking like the right colour or tone just yet. Okay. We're going to use all these colours in the face, and then it'll all make sense and come together. Beautiful. Now grab your darkest. That's your blue violet. I should probably break that. It feels too chunky, but anyway. The darkest areas are just through here. Now when your blue violet or your dark one, you don't need to use much. If you've got a lovely soft pastel, just want to put a little bit down. Don't overdo it, okay? Because it's very strong and it can get everywhere. So I'm just going to put a few little marks through there like that. Around the eyes, so we'll figure out the eyes soon. Don't do too much around the eyes just yet, because we'll get back to those. But you can sort of just lightly mark in those darker areas around the eyes. Around the base of the nose, there's some shadow there. There's a little bit in the mouth, not much. So just zhooshing a little bit of this dark in, because that's going to help to create contours and texture. And of course, tone. All right. So that's pretty much what we've got going on now. Now, on this section here, is on the left-hand side, under the white cheek, there's a little bit of white fur that comes up onto the face. We did it on the right side before, but didn't do it on this side, so pop a bit of that through there. And it's kind of the purpley colour. Might put a bit of my light grey. Let's try light grey. No, that's blue. This grey. over the top of that just to make sure we get the tone right, and then squint at my picture. Yep, that looks about right. So just check your tones all the time, and you can do that by squinting. Okay, just refining this lighter grey around the eyes. You can see around the bottom of the eyes there's a bit of a lighter grey. And the inside of the nose. So just checking your picture all the time, checking. Lighter grey up through the top there. We'll add some blue, light blue up there later on to get the highlights in. So see how that cat's now starting to make sense. It's starting to come alive. So once you've got enough pastel on the page, then we can start to push it in a little bit. So this is our base layer. This is our foundation layer. So what we're going to do now is just to blend it into your paper, because we need to have something to work with. If there's no pastel on the paper, you can't do anything much to push it around. So we need to get this first layer down. And what I'm doing, as I'm pushing it in, I'm pushing it in the direction of the hair. So think about the direction that the hair grows, or the fur. So on the top of the head there, it's going upwards, isn't it? And then as we come around the eyes, look at the direction of the hair there, so that it comes across. It's going sort of almost horizontal, and then out from the eyes to the side of the face in that direction. So pull your pastel in the direction that you can see the fur growing, because that's going to help to make it look furry. Okay, it's really important. Always pull the pastel in the direction of the thing that you're drawing or painting, whether it's fur or trees or water or whatever. You've got to really take note of the direction or the texture. So for instance, the texture in the ears is obviously skin, but there's fur in there too. So we want to try and get a bit of the feeling of that. So again, around the top of the eyes, it all starts to go kind of horizontal towards the side of the face, doesn't it? So pull the pastel that way. The nose fur is much shorter and kind of grows up. So pull that upwards, up towards the top of the head. And so when you've pushed all that in, I've only used the one finger this time. So when I'm working in smaller areas, I just use one finger. If it's a larger area that I'm pushing in, I'll use 2 or 3 fingers. So it just depends on the area, how big it is. All right. So by now you should have all of that pushed in gently, just suggesting a little mouth down there because we can't really see a whole lot of detail. But we can pop in some more afterwards. So just pushing all this around, getting it looking like tattish, hopefully. So can you see by pulling the hair up this way, it's pulled the pastel. So it started to create those beautiful markings in the fur. Lovely. Now we've got something to work with. I'm going to clean off my finger because what I want to do now is put some of my light blue up around the edges here. So I'm going to start with my mid blue. So you can see the top of the head gets lighter up through here. And what I want to do is get some of that in, get this light bit in first before we work on the ears, because the ears are in front of this section. So we need to get all this light stuff in there, and then we can come forward and work on the ears. So it's always about thinking about what's behind, what's at the back. What do I need to do before I can do that bit? So thinking. Always do the stuff at the back or underneath before you come to do the things in front. I mean, you can do it either way, but I just find it a lot easier. You'll make life easier for yourself if you do it that way. Okay, so just a bit of my blue around that edge there. And then I'm going to pick up my lightest blue. So it looks like white, but it isn't. Give it a bit of a clean. And I'm just going to zhoosh it around the edges here like this. So little soft, fluffy kind of marks using the end of it, but not the sharp edge. So lie it sort of nearly flat, but not quite, around the edges there. And we sort of want that to merge softly into the other parts. So it's not a hard line between this bright fur and the actual fur that it joins onto. So make sure you merge those edges a little bit. I've done it in the wrong direction. I've done it with a dirty finger, but I'll need to just softly push that through like that so that it sort of merges together nicely. But you still get that lovely bright sunshiny edge. And then up here across the top of the head, same sort of thing, just lying it flat, with a little stick of pastel on its side, and then just doing these little squiggly sort of movements like this. The top of the head there is really quite bright, isn't it? The sun's catching there nicely. And we can come back later with white and brighten up the brightest bits. This is just getting all those main light bits in there. And again, just merging that softly with the fur on the forehead so that it doesn't look like it's a hard line between the two. We've also got a bit of soft, fluffy stuff coming out just around the ear here. Now these are more soft lines. This is where you can still use the edge of the side of the pastel, but the tip, but making a wider kind of mark. So not a hard line. We don't want these little hard lines. We just want super soft, wispy little marks like that around the edges. Okay. Softly, softly like that. Probably doing this too soon, but anyway. I get a bit carried away sometimes. I remember, I say save the light for last and then I go and do this. But anyway, it's not the lightest light, so we can always come back and brighten that up a bit more afterwards. I just wanted to see what it looked like, really. When you're painting and you think, oh man, this is looking really bad. And sometimes it's nice just to do a bit of light or fun to encourage yourself to keep going and think, oh yeah, okay, this still has hope. It's okay. We can make it work. So it's nice to do that for yourself sometimes. Okay. So that will probably be enough fluff at the moment. So I'm going to put my pale blue away. And we'll get stuck into, what will we do next? We might do the ears, I think. So let's have a look at those. So we've got a bit of pink. There's a bit of pink skin kind of coming through around at the top here. This is that pink I wasn't fond of, but we'll see what happens. We'll pop it in and see. Probably be okay. So just a bit of pink up the top there on both the ears, because the sun's behind the cat, which makes the ears look a little bit transparent. That lovely skin kind of tone. All right, I'm just going to push that in softly like that. We've still got a little dark outline around the ear, so we can have a look at that. Leave that there and freshen it up if we need to. Push in this side as well. So that's going to give us a nice little bit of a glow on the ears. Oh, that's nice. I like that. And then inside the ears, so what we've got to do now is get some dark in there, and then we can put some of that lighter fur into the ear. So I've got my darkest pastel now, and I'm just going to darken up this part here, because we've got the lighter fur, and to see the lighter fur, we need to have dark underneath it, so it looks lighter. All right, so I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of this dark through here, and then I'm going to put a little bit of it down on the other side of the ear. This is such a strong color. I don't want to press too hard because it just gets everywhere. And I don't want to make it too strong. Okay, but we still need to have a bit of dark through there. So it's kind of darker at the base of the ears. So what we're trying to do now is create some depth. So now I've pushed that, got that on there. I'm just going to gently push it in with my finger without losing some of that pink, hopefully. Pushing it around like that. There we go. That should give us a bit of depth. And then when we put the lighter hair over the top of this, it will hopefully look like it's an ear. That's working nicely. And then I'm just going to go back over to the other one and just sharpen up this edge here a little bit. And darken off a bit more through here because I want the light to shine. So to get the light to shine, you've got to add the dark first or around it. Okay, so a little bit of that in there. Give my fingers a wipe. They're filthy now. Okay, and just gently, softly blurring that edge in a little bit. And then down into the base of the ear here, going a bit darker through there. There we go. Lovely, nice. If you've lost some of your pink, then pop a bit more on. So this is the nice thing. You can always come back and add a bit more. You know, it's just because we did it once doesn't mean you can't come back and do it again. So if you've lost some of it and you want to get more back in, just pop a bit more in. This is when we're getting more careful now. So our markings and our movements are getting smaller and more refined. There we go. That's looking all right. And if you can't get around the edges with your pastel, pick up a bit of charcoal because the charcoal, thin piece of charcoal is wonderful for getting those fine lines in through there. Now you noticed on the ears, they've got a little glow all the way around them. So that again is the light catching. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. So that's the light catching around the edges of the ears. So you can see that happening here. Very subtle. Now, my best option, I think, will be to use my white charcoal pencil. If you don't have one, then pick up your pale blue. I'll do it with the pale blue so you can see how to do it with pastel. And just so you do want the edge this time. Okay, so you want the edge of your pastel. So if you haven't got an edge, you might need to break your stick so that you get a bit of a sharp edge so you can draw a fine line. Fine lines are tricky, but it's not impossible. It just comes with practice. So I'm going to start over here because I'm left-handed and I don't want to smudge the other one. And just very softly. So this is actually not even a hard, strong line. It's a soft, broken sort of line. So try to do something like that. Very softly, just running your edge of your pastel, very sharp edge if you can get it, or your pencil if you have one. And just softly, softly pulling that around. You don't even have to have a hard line. Just make sure you kind of break up the lines a little bit so that it looks natural and sort of furry. And see how we've got fur here on the top. You can just do a little bit of a very, very, very squiggly mark through there. And that should be enough. See how that's making that shine now and glow? Because the light's behind it. Now, as I said, if you've got a pastel pencil or a charcoal pencil, that will be much easier. I just wanted to show you how to do it with your pastel stick. Because people look at what you do and they say, how did you get those fine lines in there? And it is possible. It's actually possible. And it's even more possible with the harder pastels. This is not a very hard one, but your Rembrandts and your harder ones, you can get really good sharp lines with those. So I'll go back over to this one now and do the same thing. And I'm just pressing lightly and I'm varying my pressure so that it's sort of pressing harder, then lighter, then harder to try and create a natural edge. I don't want this to be a really hard, bright line. I've got to try and keep it a bit light so that it's not too strong, just subtle, 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 and broken. If you look at the ears, you can see the edges are not all hard lines. They're sort of soft and broken. Okay, that's giving my ears a lovely little glow. You can put a bit of fluff around them if you want to. And so later on, if you came back with, this is now my charcoal white, then my white, you'll see how white the white is compared to the light blue. But you could just heighten or lighten up a couple of spots if you wanted to. Don't have to. And I'll show you here too, because I'm impatient, how much the white will glow on this blue. So this is the white pencil. You can see just up here on this side of the head is really quite bright right in there. So that's what we can do with our whites. We can come back in and study closely the lightest parts and put white in. And that'll just give us so much more shine. But we'll do that afterwards. I'm getting carried away with myself now. All right. So got our glow around the ear, a bit of a glow around the face and everywhere else. We'll touch up with white later. Let's get into the hairs of these ears now. So I'm going to use my grey. This is my mid or light grey. Okay, that's the lightest grey, this one. And again, using the edges of your charcoal, the pastel, just do some soft, soft little hairs like this. So don't press very hard, just softly, softly, wispy, wispy, wisping them around like that. Now I know they ends are all sort of starting in the same spot, but you can just dab that with your finger and soften off those edges a little bit. So again, just soft little hairs. Now they're all sort of going in the same direction, but just vary them a little bit because it's natural and the hairs all grow in different ways. And we don't want to have offensive hairs that all look exactly the same size and shape. So just vary where they go. And while you're there, there's a little bit of lighter fur just in front of the ear there. So probably lighter than this, but we'll just start with this and then we can add a bit of light afterwards. Like that. Okay. So, and then you can come back in with your dark grey if you want to and just sort of go over the hairs again and create a little bit of thicker sort of hair happening through there. So don't be afraid to mix your colours around, all right? So that's probably enough hair in there. There's a hair in there. And I'm just going to put a bit more dark in because I want to darken that up a tad so that the light hairs kind of stand out and we're getting a bit more shadow going on through there. See how that deepens the ear now? So it looks like it's a solid object. Coming in through here, darkening off in there. Beautiful. Let's go over to the other ear. Same procedure over there. So the hairs are growing the other way now. So they're actually coming from the left to the right. So you've got to pull them out that way. And varying the length of them and the way they grow. So even though they're coming all out of the same spot or same side, just sort of, you know, have some going slightly down and slightly up and crisscrossing over each other. It looks much more natural that way. Lovely. And then we've got, again, we've got some lighter hairs coming through here. So I'm just going to do a bit of a zhoosh across there where the lighter hairs are, and we can lighten those up with a bit of blue or purple. And then just gently dabbing that left side where all the hairs are growing from so that it's a bit blurred off and not too strong. Because we don't want to see where they started, do we? They kind of start inside the skin here. And then when they come out, they sort of end in wispy bits. So we want to have that effect going on. You can use your darker grey again if you want to get a bit more volume happening through there. You might find that that's too much. I don't know. Everyone's different. Depends on your colours and what your movements are. All right. I think those ears are looking pretty good right now. So we might leave those as they are for now, and we'll move on. Let's have a look at the eyes. I think we might do the eyes next, And then we can kind of work on the stuff around them, between the nose and the fur and things. So eyes are fun. I don't know how you feel about eyes, but I like doing eyes. Again, we're going to need a fine line around the edges and for the pupil. So a piece of charcoal will be good, or a black pastel pencil, or a black charcoal pencil, which I don't have anywhere near me. So it'll be charcoal for me. But first we've got to do the inside. So what we've got to do is we've got to work from the inside out with the eyes. So we've kind of got where they're going to be. So what we're going to do is fill it in first with this yellowy ochre color. All right, so we just want to get the inside filled in with the yellow. So use it on its end or whatever you can do just to get that in and give it a little rub and smooth it off nicely like that. We'll put the black outline around it afterwards. Okay, so filling this in with your yellow. You can do blue eyes if you prefer, but this guy's got yellow, green and yellow eyes. So just wanted to get a little bit of colour on there like that. Okay, good. Now, the main colour of this is this yellow colour, but I can also see there's a darker circle inside. So I'm going to use my dark grey. All right. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I'm just going to give it a whirl. So you can see that the not the pupil, the other thing, iris, is the top of the iris hits the top of the eye, right? But there's a yellow space below it. So the darker part of the iris is higher. So it comes up to the top of the eye, if you know what I mean. There's no space, there's no gap between the top of the eye and the iris because there's a shadow actually there from the eyelid. So there's a bit of dark shadow running across there. There's always shadows in eyes. So when you're doing eyes, look for the shadows of the lids that make or break. Okay, so that's a bit of the dark grey into that eye to create that darker circle that you can see in the picture. I'm going to round that out a bit more and darken it off a little bit more. It's got a bit of a ring around the edge of it if you look closely. Should zoom in on my photo. Yeah, so it's just like that, hopefully. And then we'll do the same on the other side. So see how this round dark part of the iris sits up at the top of the eye in there. And just put a bit of your grey in and then gently rub it with your finger. If your fingers are too chunky, a really good tool to get is a rubber tip blender like this. So you can buy these in a set of 6. They're just Montmartre. They're cheap and nasty, so you might get them in a $2 shop. They're not called blenders. I forget what they call them now. But they come in a set of 6. They've all got different tips on them. So if your fingers are fat and you want to get into a pointy area, these are really good for getting into the small areas where your fingers won't fit. Just to push the pastel in and blend it in a little bit. I think my fingers are okay for this part. Okay, so I've got my 2 darker areas around the eyes. Now, before we move on, I'm just going to come back with my ochre again and brighten up the edge a little bit. Get that yummy yellow back in there. So see how that's happening? And if you grab a bit of charcoal or a dark pastel, we want to put some shadow at the top of here now. So charcoal's good because we can kind of push it around a little bit and it's not too dark. Nice sort of soft dark grey, really. And then a bit of shadow across this one as well. It's again, so make sure we get that shadow across there and just softly dab it with your finger so that you're pushing it in gently. It's not a strong, hard line. It's really subtle. subtle, subtle. Because when we put the top of the eye in with our black, we just want this shadow to sit underneath that dark line that we'll put in after. Okay, good, good. And then we can just gently draw around here as well. And mark those areas out. Lovely. How's our cat going? It's starting to look very catty now. Now, we've got to get those little black pupils in there. Yeah, pupils. I'm going to try it with charcoal. I don't know if it's going to be black enough. Often it isn't, but I'm going to mark it in. So remember, these are a vertical shape. It's not a hard line. It's kind of got a bit of a round shape to it, but they're definitely longer than they are wide. Don't know that the charcoal is going to work for me. I think it's too light. So I'm just got to go and grab a black tinsel, tip my dust off before I go. Black charcoal or pastel, let's see. Okay, so I've got a black charcoal pencil. I actually find this works better than a pastel pencil if you're trying to do really fine lines. It's a soft, extra soft charcoal pencil. It's a General's brand. I'm going to buy more when I get back to the art shop because it's really great. I had to do like barbed wire on a fence on one of my paintings, and the pastel pencil just wouldn't stick over the pastel that was already on the page, but this worked beautifully. So I just find that you can get a much better mark sometimes with the charcoal pencil, but make sure it's soft. If it's a hard one, it might not work as well. So use whatever you've got, whether it be a pencil or a piece of charcoal, or maybe you've just got a stick of pastel that you've got to manage to do this with, which is also possible. Should be brave and show you how to do that. Hang on a sec. Let me find a bit of black now. Pastels get so dirty when they all play together. So just got to test and see if that's black. Yep, that looks like black. It's filthy. Anyway, it's got a funny little sharp broken end on it. I might be, see, what you need to do when you're using a stick of pastel is find a sharp edge, right? So this one, I reckon I can probably make it work because it's got a broken edge on it. So you'll need something that's got a sharp edge. So let me see, which way do these pupils go? There's there. Let's see if I can get that in. And I've got to press pretty hard. Just press hard like that. And don't push your fingers in there. If you put your fingers into it, it's going to lose its darkness. Now that's dust on that, so I'm just going to zhoosh the dust off. Okay, now I think I went crooked there. It's looking like it's on the wrong angle. So go a bit straighter. Or is that one wrong? Something's wrong. You know, don't you? But you're not quite sure what it is. Anyway, that will do for now because we can put the out. I know it looks weird at the minute, but once we put the dark around the eye, then it should start to make some more sense. So we've got our pupils in there and we'll put a little shine on there too. I'm just back to my pencil now because it's easier. And now we've got to darken off around the eyes. So there's eyes around at the base here. Okay, so we go around, keep checking your shape, just drawing the edge in like that to get it nice and dark around there. And then we come down through here. It's dark in here as well. It's not quite as black, but it is dark through there. So you can either use your dark grey or just touch it lightly with a black pencil. And then across the top. So we've got to come across the top. The top comes across in that cute little shape there where it sort of comes off here. And if you haven't got enough shadow on your eye, then maybe put a bit more of that in now with your black pencil or your charcoal, whatever you've got. See, we're in the fiddly bits now. When you're in the small areas, it's harder to get it to work because sometimes you want to stick your fingers in and blend things and you can't fit your finger in there. So try anything you've got. Try charcoal, try blenders, all sorts of stuff will help. And you'll find what works for you. Doesn't always work for everyone. I'm using charcoal now just around the outside of the eye because I like the color of it. It's not too black and it's helping me to round out that shape a little bit more. So we've got a black rim around the actual iris, and then around the rim is a grayer, more gray than black. So noticing those very subtle little changes between those things, and then the shadow on the eye. You can put a few little sort of zigzaggy shapes through the iris as well if you want to, just to give it, you know, that variation in the color. Okay, but again, if you've got your picture on a screen, then, you know, zoom in, have a really close look at what's going on in there, and it'll help you see all the detail. There we go. So I reckon that might be enough for now. We've got to fix this shape of the pupil a little bit, so it's like almost a not diamond. Anyway, a thing. It's got a point on each end, hasn't it? So see how the shadow on that is making it look like it's sinking into the head, which is what we want. Then when we get all the fur around it, it'll make more sense then. But you can see how the shadow is doing that. We've got this lovely dark outline around the edge. And when we put the shine in the eye, that's when it'll come alive. Okay. Now remember we picked up this really pale yellow before. Just want to see it. Don't do it yet. I'm just going to test it first. See if it's a bit too bright around the edge there. Maybe. So if I put a bit of that down and then go over it again with my ochre, just trying to lighten up that outline a little bit more without making it look silly. It's not too bad, actually. I quite like what happened then. So this is how, you know, when you want to lighten something or darken it, just try other colors. Don't go straight to blacks and whites, but this light yellow sort of around the edge like that, just a tad, little tiny bit, and then come back over it with the ochre that we used originally. And it just lightens it up a little bit, but not too bright. That's quite nice. I quite like that. Just push that in softly. Push, push, push. Careful where you put your fingers. It's really easy to blur and mess this up now because we're doing fine work. Okay, I'm going to tip off my dust and then we'll do the next eye. All righty, let's get stuck into this. So I'm just going to fix up the pupil a bit, get the shape of that right. I've got the picture of the cat zoomed in onto the eye now, so I can see nice and clearly what shape that needs to be. That one too. It should have a little point on the top and the bottom of it, and it rounds out around the edges. Tip off my dust. Try not to blow your dust because it goes everywhere. I was talking to a lady in art class yesterday who does pastels at home, and she's telling me about this little battery-operated blower thing that she uses on her pastel. And I said, well, where does the dust go? She said, in the air. I said, what? She said, yeah, it's in the air. I said, are you inside? She said, yeah. On carpet? Yeah. Okay. So not in the air. It's going to go in your carpet, in your hair, and your lungs, and everything else. So much better if you can just tip it off and then take your towel or whatever outside later, give it a shake, and then it's not in your house. So remember, as kids, when we used erasers, we used to always blow it. So it comes sort of naturally to want to blow it. It's really hard not to. I'm sitting here really wanting to do that, but I can't do it to yourself. So just darkening off around the edges of the eye again. Back to using my pencil. So looking closely at the shape, see the top right of the eye, where the pointy bit is, I suppose you'd say, is blacker. And then it comes down and the fur kind of sits over the top here. So there's not as much black there, down there. And then it's blacker up here and then around the outside of the iris. And then we've got a bit of grey around the outside of that. So I might use my charcoal again for that bit. Just tip off this dust again. And don't forget the shadow. We've got to get that shadow in here. So using a bit of charcoal to get the shadow in, that will sink the eye back into the head and make it look like it's a 3D thing and not just a picture. See, it's already working. It looks good. Like it. And then down through here, so where what we have a tear duct, I don't know where the cats do, but anyway, where that would be in this area here next to the nose. So we've got this little grey sort of area around there and around the outside of the eye. More grey, so I'm using charcoal to get that right. And then it comes down to this, down the side of the nose like that. So it's like a triangular shape at the side of the nose. And then across this eye, because it's a bit different to the other one, but I'll do this in a light grey so you can see what I'm talking about. Actually, they're both similar now I look at it. But this one comes down across like that, sort of. So it sinks down behind this fur. Does that make sense? So there's the black line around the eye doesn't come to this point here. We've got the fur or the nose coming over the top of it. It's actually similar over this side too. So the fur is coming over the top, which makes the cat's eye look more cat's eye-ish. Okay, so I'm just using a bit of black to make that point a bit pointier. So it looks a bit cattier. Beautiful. Lovely. All right, now fur. So I've just used the light grey to put that fur over there, but I'm going to put a bit more dark grey over it now because it's sort of a mix of both. Same on this side. Down through there. And then we can move on. Now, shall we do the shine in the eye now or wait till the end? Let's do it now. Pick up your pale blue, so not your white. Remember, we'll start off with pale blue. Now I can see in these eyes, there's reflection of sky or something like that. So it makes sense to have blue in there rather than white. This is the lightest blue. Or you could try the other blue. Let's try the other, no, we'll do the lighter one. All right, skipping off dust. Now, notice where the shine is. So there's a shine in here, all right? And it's just above the pupil and it's sort of inside the shadow area. So when you do the shine, what you want to do is, I'll show you with a darker color so you can see it on this white paper. You just want to push your pastel and just push it hard and do a little tiny wiggle and then lift it up, okay? Because what we want to do is get nice pure pigment sitting on the top there. We're not going to blend it in with fingers or any of that. We just want to touch it down like this, give it a little wiggle, try to make the shape of the shine that you want, and then lift off. And do not touch it unless it's in the wrong spot or something like that. But try not to put your fingers in there because it's going to lose the zing of it. Okay, so you can do that on the left, our left, and then move over to the other eye. So we've got a couple of shines in that one. There's a bright shine on the right side, just there. So I'm just going to do a little there. And then there's a lighter, softer shine, not quite as bright, sort of there. Okay, and try not to touch it. If you touch it, it'll get muddy and dirty and lose its power. So that's beautiful, I think. It's looking pretty nice. Okay, let's move on. So now we've got to do, we might do the fur around the head, and then we'll come down and do the cheeks, finish off the nose. And before then, we've got to do the lips. So we might touch the lips now. Let's do that now. So pick up your dark grey. Now the lips is literally just a dark section here, and then it comes down, comes across like that, sort of. That's all. It's not very much. Comes down a little bit lower actually, like that. And if we just softly pull that out a little bit with your fingers, just to blur the edges off, so that it's just subtly sitting there. And it is slightly darker up directly under the nose there, so you can get a bit of your dark violet blue violet, zhoosh that in there, and so that top of that triangle, and just then softly pull it out gently. Okay, that'll be enough to put the mouth in. All right, let's get some of this fur happening around the face. So just looking at my cat on my screen. So we've got a fair bit of dark and light going on in here. So let's start with our dark. And what I'm going to do is just zhoosh it around like this, okay? So we just want to zhoosh on its side and blurring it softly, okay, out to, remember to pull it in the direction that the fur is growing. Because as we build this up, we're going to stop blending and start just letting the pastel sit on the top and sing. Okay, so zhooshing that around through there. And around through here. Around on the cheeks. Okay, so I've got a bit of that on there now. Now I can come in with my lighter grey and just noticing where those lighter grey tones are. So we've got all those interesting little markings up here above the nose. So just marking those in softly with your pastel, just using it on its side. So keep it on its side so you're getting soft, sort of fluffy marks, not hard lines. And pulling it in the direction of the hair. So see how I'm pulling this out like this above the eyes where the eyebrows go, pulling it in that direction. So now we're starting to create the feeling of the fur growing in that direction, and softly just zhooshing it out like this around the face. So pulling it from the eyes out towards the side of the face. I've got it on its side. You might have yours on its side also, but using it this way. So you can do it like, you can still do lines, but you're doing it with the pastel lying down on its side. It's looking a bit evil, this one. Okay. Now I want to get a bit of light in there. So I'm going to bring in this blue. Remember we used the blue before. It's not the lightest blue, but it's a sort of a sky blue. And I want to get a bit of this in here where I've got some lighter blues. So just softly pushing that pastel around. Now, if you're using the tip or the end of the pastel, then you can do that. You're going to have to do a lot more work though, because it's going to require a lot of fur making if you're doing all these tiny little marks. But if you have it on its side, you'll get a wider, softer mark, and that'll really take a lot less time to fill in, and it'll look more natural because it's got this lovely soft, wispy sort of effect. So just doing that, noticing where the lighter fur is. So we haven't done the nose much yet. We'll get into that in a sec. But see around the eyes here, it's a little bit lighter around there. So you can get your blue and just softly pull it around like that. Okay, so you're making these lovely soft little wispy marks. And the same on the other side. So I'm just using the end of the pastel, but on its side, basically. So it's a wider, softer mark coming out into the fur. Now I've mucked up my black line there, put some blue over it, so I can just come back over that with my charcoal and clean it all up. So if you do mess up your lines, you can always come back. If you've got a pencil or a fine bit of charcoal, you can come back and sharpen those up. So don't stress too much if that happens. You can always tidy things up afterwards. So just looking at where the lighter fur is and putting in some of this blue. I'll throw a little bit in the ears as well, just to get a bit of light hair happening through there. Remember, the top of the head is really light. So I'm just going to kind of add a bit of the blue into there, into that pale blue that we used earlier, to create a bit of contrast and tone. It's light here behind the right ear, our right, a little bit of light just coming in through here. It's not shiny light, bright light like the edges of the cat, but it's a lighter colour fur. So we need to use a lighter colour pastel. We've got those whisker thingies coming out of the eyebrows too, so we can sort them out after. We'll use white pencils or white pastel for those. Okay, so just zhooshing around. If you feel like you need to add a bit more dark, then grab some dark and do that. Vary it a lot because we've got quite a lot of contrast through the fur here. So I've just picked up my darkest, which is my blue violet. And I'm just putting some of that in very softly. So we want to stop blending. No more blending. I'm going to try and get the pastels to look furry without pushing them around with our fingers now. So this is the part, it gets a bit tricky. It's tempting to blend. I want to blend all the time, but you lose the effect of the pastels if you do. So I've got to try and get the pastels to look like they're furry. Okay, just pushing some of the dark up into the top of the head there. It's coming along nicely. Good, good. Now I'm going to go down into the nose. You can see the tip of the nose is quite dark, and we've got the little nostrils in there too. So I'm going to darken off through there and see if I can make the nostrils look dark enough. Let me see if I can do that. Might need a bit of black maybe. All right. Yeah, we'll leave that as it is for now. I'll come back to that, fix it up at the end, because now we need to get these little white cheeks in here. Don't use white though, okay? So let's start with our mid blue. That's this blue. Then we can lighten up as we go if we need to. So don't start too light too soon. And if we need to add white, we can. We can use white on the whiskers, and that'll make the whiskers really pop on top of this blue or light blue. I'm going to put the light blue over the top of this in a minute and get it lighter. But I just want to get something down there to start with. Okay, so that's going to be my lighter areas. And then we've got some light coming up here, haven't we, on the nose? It's light through there and then up into a bit of a triangular shape and then down about there. So I'm just marking in the lighter areas with this blue colour. There's a zhoosh of shine on the nose there. Blue is lovely to use for things like shines. Okay, so I'm going to tip off my dust. And I am going to push this blue in a little bit just because I need it to hang on to the paper so I can pop the other lighter colour over the top. So just using my one finger and gently pushing that in to the paper so it hangs on. There we go. Lovely. Now, pick up your pale blue. This is my lightest blue. Okay, so we're still not using white. We're going to keep using this colour and the blues and purples to get these beautiful lights in here. And I'm just very gently now pushing this lighter blue in. I'm doing soft little squiggly marks because this hair is kind of short and soft, isn't it? And then it sort of blends out over the other grey hair. So make sure you do soft little edges too, so that it sort of spreads out through there and looks sort of wispy. Okay, and I know I want to put my fingers in there and pull it out and see if that happens, what happens. Yeah, not too bad. And then I can just come back over and put a bit more on. So just making that lovely, soft and wispy like that, down through here and across. Going a bit low there, never mind. I'll just darken that off again with my grey. So see how easy it is to fix things. It's really cool. All right, so I've got my light blue over there. There is a soft patch of grey through here on the nose, so we can put a bit of that in here now, just so it doesn't look too weird. Might need to be a bit darker. Where's my dark grey? There it is. Zhooshing through there. Bit of dark, lovely. Then over onto this side, so we can put some of this pale blue through here as well. And again, making the edges really wispy and soft so that it blends in with the other fur. No hard lines. And just do soft little furry movements to get the lighter pastel onto there. Notice under the nose that it's a little darker down in there because there's shadow. So we can put a bit more of the, put some of that purple in. I think that might help get the dark back in there. So there we are, beautiful. So that's looking quite white, isn't it? It's amazing how the blue can look white when you don't have white there. Okay, so just checking your shapes, making sure that your cheeks, sort of these little white bits, are nice and round and the right shape. I'm going to tip off the dust. Okay. Now, just going to touch up some of this here, tidy up my edges. So just check you've got the shapes right. So we want that little bit of grey fur there. Top of the nose is a little bit lighter on this section here. And then it gets more shadow on the left side. So just lightening that up a tiny bit to give it a bit of contour. And then that comes up here into this little bit of grey fur. Checking all the time, just checking the colour of the fur around the eyes. I've just noticed I need to put a bit of light through here. And that, remember that we put that pale colour around the eyes and the fur, so I just need to tidy that up a little bit if you didn't get it spot on. There we go, down through there. Just tidying. Looking at the nose, looking at the mouth. The mouth looks okay. Just put a bit of light grey through that. Now, on the bottom of these, where the whiskers come out, we've got some little rows. They're like, not dark enough. I'm going to use my dark grey. So you don't want anything really dark. It's just got to create a bit of a ridge or a shadow through here. So I'm using the tip of the chart, the pastel, the edge end, and I'm just dotting sort of across there. I'm not drawing a hard line because they're not hard lines. I'll put my finger in it and muck it all up. And then just dabbing it softly with your fingers so that you are kind of pushing it in without blending it too much, because we don't want to blend it in. We don't want to dirty our beautiful white cheeks. We just want to softly push it in to indicate the shapes of where the whiskers come out. And I've got to just darken off inside where that mouth goes again, because it looks a bit like he's got a fat lip. Just darken off over here a little bit with my pencil. Go. And I'll tip off my dust. And I mentioned earlier that it's a little bit of shadow. Where's my purple gone? A little bit of shadow under here. It's sort of slightly darker just through there. So I'm just going to darken that off. We'll give it a bit of, hopefully, what looks like shadow around under there. So between the nose and the mouth, just to give it look like it's got some contour coming out. Hopefully the purple will do that. Might not be dark enough actually. Pop a bit of dark grey over the top, just a smidge. Find an end that's not too sharp. I don't want sharp lines now, so you've got to keep moving your pastel around in your hand to find the right side or edge. That's better. So sometimes you just need to mix some colours on your paper. So I've mixed my purple and my grey to make that nice little subtle shadow happening through there. Put a bit of it across the base here too. You've got to think about where the light's coming from. So the light's coming from behind, but it means that anything that's folding underneath, like a chin or the mouth, is going to be darker in shadow because there's shadow down in here, remember? We put shadow down there before. All right, I think we're just about there. We're nearly there. So that's looking okay. Just going to check all my shapes. I think I need to work a bit more on the nose. So see the end of the nose, we have this sort of, I'll draw it in purple so you can see what I'm talking about. It goes across like this on the end. And then it comes down and we can see the nostrils either side. It comes down in a little, like a T shape. So if I make that purple, I know it's too light, but that's what I was talking about, was that shape there. And it comes down like that. So if I make that dark grey, see if that'll be dark enough. I'm not sure that it will. Because it is definitely darker than the rest of the nose. Yeah, it needs to be. Just going to tip the dust off. Pop a bit of my blue violet in here now, just a teeny bit to darken that nose off a tad. I want the nostrils to be seen, and they're quite dark. So if I do this in blue violet, then I can use black for the nostrils, hopefully. So just dab that softly, push it in a little bit. Getting there, we're getting there. And then if I grab my charcoal pencil and just do a little bit of a dark shape there and there, it's like a circle. It comes down and then it sort of outlines the bottom of the nose there. See how that's now looking more nosy? Yeah, that's better. Now it looks like a cat, not just with a blob on the end of its face. This needs to be evened up though. So if you're not sure, just look at the negative space or the nose around the nostrils or the nostrils around the nose, whichever way works for you. You've got to kind of change your brain sometimes to see around something before it'll make sense. So if you're struggling with the shape of something, look at the negative space around it. And often to draw that instead of the thing that you're trying to draw is easier. So I'm just going to darken off, just outline this little bit here a bit more so that it looks like a nose. Dab it a little bit to soften off the edges. It's darker up through here. Good-o. Just going to run around this with, now's the time to go, oh, now do I need to go darker somewhere? Is black going to be a good option? And And sometimes it is. So if you need to add some dark somewhere to get some more drama happening in your art, then this is now, when you're nearly there, now's the time to look at your blacks and your whites. All right, so I'm going to throw a bit of black up into this ear because I just want a bit of depth happening through there. I think that just gives it a bit more excitement and drama. And on the other side too, not much, just a smidge, just to give it some more depth. Okay. And down in here, it's quite dark at the bottom of the ear there. This is why I save my lights and darks for last, because then you can really add some nice touches to get the drama into your art. So that's just made the ears a little bit more poppy. And then I can look at the cat and think, oh, actually, there's some nice black sort of marks coming up here and here. This is where those little white eyebrows thingies are going to pop out. So I want to get a bit of black on there so that the white pops. Okay. So again, I'm just using it on its side and trying to get some of these really fluffy sort of fairy marks happening. So you can now run around and kind of define different areas that you think might need more dark. You can't get blacker than black, so save it for the blackest areas. Okay, don't overdo it because then it loses its impact. So you've got to be quite selective and careful about where you put it. If you want your eyes to pop more, then maybe a bit more black around the eyes. If you've got enough black, then maybe a bit more light. So this light blue, could be nice around this bit here to get those little eyes to look like they're in the head. And then the little bit of light hair around them will make them pop out more. Give it some more texture. So just have a wander around now, checking back at your reference photo, looking at all the bits and bobs and thinking about, do I need to add more light? Does this need to be brighter or darker or whatever? Look at your black and white picture too, because that'll really help you find where you might want to add some lights and darks. I always like to have a black and white picture of whatever I'm painting because then you can find your tones really well. Okay, now what we need to do next is think about white and where do we need to add some white to get the final highlights in here. So when you're looking at your photo, the lightest parts are at the back of the cat on the top there where the fur's popping up through here. So if I get white, and I'm going to go for a pencil, or no, I won't, I'll use pastel. This is white, I think. You can get off whites as well, but anyway, that should be white enough. So this is my white. This is the lightest light now. So this is the heart, the fun bit. This is where you get to go, whoa, and get the highlight. So we'll just start around this ear area here, right? So not too much, just a few little wispy bits like that to get some shine happening. And then just on the edges up here too. So I'm just using the edge of the pastel, using the sharp edge and softly doing these wispy bits right on the tip. Okay, so we don't want to do it everywhere because then it'll lose its power. So you have to, less is more, as they say. Just a smidge across the top here. Okay, not too much. And then over here, there's a lovely, lovely light bit just here at the back of the cat behind this ear. So we can wisp that around too. Lovely, soft, wispy sort of marks. Get that light shining through there. And where else have we got some? We've got a little bit down here on the chest. So again, just right along the edge of that. Lovely soft marks coming out through there. So now you can see the difference, can't you, now between the light blue and the white? So that's why I saved my lights for last. And then if you feel like it's looking a bit too, not naturally attached, come back in with your light blue or whatever light you used and softly just merge the edges a bit more so that it looks like it's all connected. Okay, you can just softly merge them, merging, so that it all looks like it's all together, not a big white stripe across the edges like that. And that'll give you a really nice glow. And I'm just going to lighten up the edge of this ear a tad. So again, I'm using my white pastel, found a lovely sharp edge on it, and I can just lighten up that outer edge there. Put a few little furry bits on the tip of the ear for fun, and on the tip of this guy, so I can add a bit more light through there. I think I used the pencil on that before. It's not quite as white as this. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. All right. Now, just back to this part here, the top of the head's looking a bit funny. Just going to zhoosh some of this light down through there. There we go. That will just about do it, I think. And then we need to put these hairs on. So again, either a white pencil or a piece of pastel that's got a nice sharp edge on it, which you might have to break it to get that. And then we can just draw in these long whispery thingies, hairs. So you've got to sort of start and stop and don't go over it. So like that. We'll just do lovely wispy sort of marks. They all grow out of that bit there. So that's giving me some eyebrow hairs. Same over here. Big long one up into the ear. That one goes up to there. This one's got a little curl on it. So they're all slightly different lengths and shapes. And then the same with the whiskers. So you can do the whiskers as well. I hate doing this because it's like the final thing. And if you muck it up, it's impossible. Not impossible, but difficult to fix. You've got to try and keep your marks light and wispy. And as you finish at the end of the whisker, lift it off the page so you get that sort of soft finish, which didn't happen right there. I'd be naughty and put my fingers in there. And then on the other side, so depending on whether you're left or right-handed will depend on how easy it is on each side for you. Try to start where the whisker grows from and then pull it out towards the edge. It just looks more natural that way than bringing it in from the other direction. As hard as it is sometimes if you're, if you're left or right-handed. I think my whiskers are a bit too thick, but anyway, that'll do. They're very thin on the picture, aren't they? Maybe let's see what pencil would have done. Pencil's much lighter. Yeah, better. So see, the pencil whiskers would have been better. That's okay. Some of us don't have pencils, so you have to make do with what you've got. But I would definitely recommend getting some pencils, at least charcoal pencils in black and white. That'll get you out of trouble. You can run around it with your pencil if you have one and just sort of touch things up a little bit. Don't forget to sign your work. So put your name on it somewhere. Then we'll know whose is whose. So that is that, and that is our cat. I hope you've enjoyed today's class. And if you have any questions or anything, please get in touch. I'd love to see your paintings too, so don't be afraid to send them on to me. And it'd be really nice to share. So thanks for coming along today. Really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.